And we are back live here in the studio, and joining me is Joe Madureira, legendary comic book artist, and working on the Darksiders 2 now, but like really, you're a guy who was at Comic-Con before Comic-Con, played host to video games and Twilight and True Blood and like all these diverse forms of media, you know, when it was more comic oriented. How is it for you to be back here? You know, what is this like? How many Comic-Cons are you going on here about? Give us an estimate.
Probably. Well, I started in comics like 20 years ago, so but I only probably have been to like about 10 Comic-Cons.
And now have you done the like sit at a table, drawing, sign autographs thing? Or
yeah. I usually do like signings and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Now, I mean, you're here now talking about Darksiders 2, and we recently put up a preview for this. And you folks, if you haven't gotten a chance to read about it, it's a new protagonist, new adventure. Let's give folks sort of an overview of what to expect. Darksiders 2. In the first game, you played as one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Exactly. So, you know, in the first game, you're War, and you know he's framed. There's a conspiracy between heaven and hell. Earth is wiped out, and he kind of takes the fall for it. Mm-hmm. So he has his whole journey to sort of prove his innocence the first time around. And we ended on like a cliffhanger, actually. But in the sequel, we thought it'd be fun to, rather than pick up where that game left off, you know, we'll actually let you see like another like side of the story and play as Death, War's brother, you know, another horseman. And we thought it would really shake things up. It's like people would not expect us to like build a franchise on one character and then like switch it up, switch it up. But it gives the world, like, it gives you a unique perspective on the world, and introduces you to a whole bunch of other characters that even influence the first game from behind the scenes that maybe you weren't aware of. Because it actually happens concurrently with the first story.
Oh, no kidding.
For portions of it. And so you get to kind of see like what else was going on while War was having his journey on Earth.
What other forces were at work.
Exactly.
And so if you played Darksiders, that'll just, you know, enrich your understanding of that game and of this game as well. But for folks who maybe didn't play Darksiders, this is totally like, you know, jump in, play as
you
Death.
can jump in, play it, you'll totally get it. But, you know, like you said, if you have played the first one, there's a lot of cool surprises and characters that show up again, and new things you learn. And we're kind of hoping that if you haven't played the first one, once you check out Darksiders 2, you'll want to go back. Or even if you have already beaten it, it's kind of like a good story. You go back and like now, knowing what you know now, you kind of get like a new appreciation.
Get a little bit more out of it, yeah. All right, now so talk to me about War, obviously, you know, a strong, fiery protagonist. Talk about how Death is similar to, you know, he's of the same ilk, a horseman of the apocalypse, his brother, but he's his own beast. He's a whole different character.
He's really different. You know, if we were going to talk about like archetypes, you know, War is like the warrior, and Death is a little more of like a rogue or an assassin or whatever. And the thing that makes him cool is, you know, War was very much about honor and justice and all this stuff. He upheld the law no matter what. And Death really is not concerned about that kind of stuff. Like in fact, his whole mission in the second game is not even sanctioned by the Charred Council, this force that governs sort of between heaven and hell. Death just kind of goes off on his own to like help free his brother, who is now imprisoned because of what happened in Darksiders 1. So he's like a rule breaker. He's a bad boy. You know, I guess you know, if we compare him to like a comic book character, he's a little more like Wolverine than Thor or whatever War would be.
Right. So
it's a lot of fun.
Gives the whole narrative a different tone, and the whole game a different tone. Now, War was accompanied by, you know, a couple characters. He had his horse, and I believe he had like a familiar as well that he was accompanied by. Maybe I'm misremembering it, but Death, does he mostly roll solo?
Yeah, well, War had the Watcher, who was sort of like tasked with making sure he didn't, you know, like they didn't want to lose control over him, so he had the permission to like kill War if he strayed from his mission. And
right.
He was voiced by Mark Hamill, so he was a lot of fun. And in this one, Death's horse is called Despair, or his mount. I don't like to call it a horse, but
a little bit more than a horse.
Steed,
a little different.
Yeah. And he does have a familiar, and it's a crow this time, and
cool.
It sort of like guides you in more subtle ways. It doesn't talk or like bicker with you or anything like the Watcher did in the first one, but it'll sort of like hover around important areas or land on things and things like that. It's a little more like in the environment, and it's really cool.
Okay. Now, can we talk about how Death, what his martial skills are like? How does he differ in combat from War? We saw him wielding a big hammer in those clips you're showing. How is that a change up?
So the hammer, so we have, his primary weapon is a scythe, and it sort of breaks down into two sides, and he's a lot more agile, more lightly armored, and just like more, like a ninja, for lack of a better word. But you do get a lot of different weapon types this time around. That's why you saw the hammer, and there's like throwing weapons. There's all kinds of stuff like claws. But the scythe will always be your primary weapon. And the cool thing about like where combat really changes this time is that there's loot drops, and you can equip different weapons and different armor pieces, which are reflected on the character. The first time around, War had just the armor. But with Death, you'll be mixing and matching. You'll be dropping loot and finding better loot. It'll enhance his skills, abilities. He has a skill tree this time, which is customizable, so you can like have like a more spell-based guy or a more like combat-driven guy. It really is up to you. So that changes the dynamics of the combat a lot. It's a lot more variety.
You get to have more hand in which sort of path you take through the world.
It is more like an RPG, which we always kind of wanted to do in the first place. So it's like we kind of threw a ton of RPG elements into it.
All right. Well, that's very intriguing, for folks who like to put their mark on the game. It helps you sort of get a little more involved. Talk to us about the world. In Darksiders, War was in the post-apocalyptic world. You traveled through wrecked cities and burned down civilization, basically. Is that this takes place concurrently? Is Death in similar environments?
Totally different. Actually, it's more of a fantasy game, which again we always wanted to do. And you'll see bits and pieces of Earth, and you'll kind of like get a glimpse at what's going on there, and even visit there for a short time. But 90% of the game this time takes place in the Underworld, which is literally like a world in itself, or several worlds tied together by these portals. So you're going to see like ancient, devastated ruins. You're going to see like this like haunting forest type environment. There's like a lot of variety this time out. You're not just like on Earth. And
the Underworld is a sinister place, right? I mean, this war is going through and sort of in a war-wrecked city, and there are evil forces that have come in there. But I imagine the Underworld is someplace where like evil forces have been living there for a long time. Yeah,
well, not just evil, but like sort of like it's like all relative, right? It's like there's some guys that are good, there's some guys that are neutral, and there's some that are evil. There's demons there, there's an area with like corrupted angels, there's an area with just like dead spirits. So we wanted to get a ton of variety in there, and it's not just like this drab, gray place with like,
right, with just a bunch of sad people hanging around, like, I'm dead.
Just like the Horsemen were like our version of the Horsemen, like our Underworld is completely our own as well. So.
And has that been? I mean, do you take what's your role in sort of creating that world? Like, how has that been for you to just create? Have sort of a tie to a previous game, but just be able to make this whole new place.
It's a lot of fun. We have an amazing art team, and now I'm like just a lot more hands off, and I'll just sort of like guide the process in a more directorial role. Early on I was doing a lot of the concepts, but now it's just like a snowball rolling downhill, and I just kind of make sure that it's going the right way. But I'm super excited. I'm more into fantasy games and RPGs and stuff anyway, so like I personally like the sequel a lot more just because there's so many more of those elements in the environments and stuff like that. And I think people have commented on what they've seen already on the scale of some of the structures and like giant serpents floating around and pulling ships around. Like there's so much you can do when it's fantasy. We're not really tied down to, just like parking lots and abandoned garages and stuff. I don't know. Earth is just not that exciting of a place. So.
Yeah, go create your own world and then get to spice it up. And
exactly.
I mean, you saw giant dragons and winged enemies in that trailer just then. Certainly looking very cool. And thank you so much for coming by and talking about Darksiders 2. Can you tell folks when they're going to be able to play, or give them a window? If they're looking ahead to the release of this game, they want to get their hands on it.
Honestly, I don't even know if there's a release date. There probably is. Look it up online. I don't want to say.
Well, you guys have just started talking about it, know. So, but we've got, we just posted a lengthy preview. Sean McInnes wrote up on it. So if you want to learn more about Darksiders 2, be sure to check that out once our live show has concluded. Joe Madureira, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you. Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of the con. Hope you get to experience some of the best this place has to offer.
Awesome.
And
I will, for sure.
Put another notch in your Comic-Con belt.